Hey there, pirates! Welcome aboard the Anime No Me channel. Soon, the entire truth of the world of One Piece will be revealed. Right now, we're seeing the Battle of God Valley, but soon, we'll learn the truth about the Void Century and, with it, the truth about the D. It all begins with the Great Kingdom, described by Vegapunk in Chapter 1115 as an advanced civilization that mastered solar energy and technologies that made the world shine, like the mother flame that Imu uses to vaporize islands in Chapter 1060. The D were the beating heart of this kingdom, a lineage of warriors or leaders who carried the initial as a symbol of dawn or freedom, inspired by Nika, the sun god who laughs at oppression in Chapter 1044. Imagine Joy Boy, Luffy's ancestor, leading the charge with his Hito Hito no Mi model. Nika, turning battlefields into elastic playgrounds, stretching fists that cracked mountains and made enemies dance like dolls in the Gear 5 that Luffy awakens in Chapter 1045. The other kingdoms, fearful of this power that defied their hierarchies, saw the D as demons spreading chaos, as Imu calls them enemies of God in Chapter 1085 because they preached absolute equality, inciting revolts that threatened thrones with mythical fruits and ancient weapons like Pluton, which destroys islands in Chapter 1060. The battle must have been an apocalypse. The 20 kingdoms united under Imu, who was already an eternal shadow in Chapter 1086, unleashing demonic powers that devoured light like the shadows that vaporized Sabo in Chapter 1085 against the Great Kingdom's army of innovators. The D, heroes to the oppressed but villains to kings, used Nika to create zones of freedom where enemies laughed and transformed, just like Luffy and Wano in Chapter 1045, turning soldiers into involuntary allies with forced laughter. But the kingdoms counterattacked with numbers and betrayals, perhaps using fruits like Imu's, which manipulates reality in Chapter 1085, or allies like the ancestors of the celestial dragons, who enslaved races such as Kuma's Buccaneers in Chapter 1160. Picture the chaos. Joy Boy stretching the horizon like rubber, shattering enemy fleets with solar punches that evaporated seas, while Imu's Abyss swallowed entire islands, creating the holes in the map that Vegapunk mentions in Chapter 1115 as remnants of ancient sinkings. The D fought for radical ideals, like total freedom that the kingdoms feared because it dissolved classes, inciting slaves like those in God Valley in Chapter 1095 to rebel with powers that turned the world upside down. But this radicalism painted them as villains. Imagine an ancestral D using Pluton to sink an oppressive nation, saving innocents but causing tsunamis that killed thousands. A heroic act to some but demonic to others, justifying the fear that the Gorosei still feel in Chapter 1044 upon seeing Nika awakened. The kingdoms with alliances like the ancestors of Garling Figureland in Chapter 1158 used dirty tactics, perhaps infiltrating traitors into the Great Kingdom, as Oda loves with spies like Stussy in Chapter 1073, leading to its fall after years of war that sank continents. Just like the world, rising in Chapter 1115 is a direct consequence. Are the D heroes or villains? The answer is a dark gray that Oda loves to paint, like villains with deep layers in Chapter 780 with Doflamingo. To the Great Kingdom, the D were heroes, fighting for freedom with Nika and weapons like Pluton, defying the tyranny of the 20 kingdoms in Chapter 1115. But to the victors, who became the world government, they were villains, demons who brought chaos with powers that destroyed nations, just like Luffy does in Wano in Chapter 1045 when he awakens Nika and turns the battlefield into a rubber circus. The dark truth, the D may have sacrificed innocents in their quest for equality, just as Akainu justifies massacres for justice in Chapter 397, making them anti-heroes, whom the government paints as monsters to justify the historical blackout in Chapter 395. Luffy, upon discovering this, would laugh first, like Roger in Chapter 968, saying, "Heroes or villains, who cares? They fought for what they believed in, just like me." But the weight would fall, as in Chapter 576 with Ace, making him question, "Is my name a curse?" He would embrace the legacy, turning the obscure into motivation, shouting, "If the D are demons, I'm the demon who sets everyone free." The 20 kingdoms feared the D for their disruptive power and radical ideals that threatened hierarchies, as revealed in Chapter 1115, where Vegapunk says the Great Kingdom was too advanced, with solar energy rivaling the gods. The D, like Joy Boy with Nika in the Chapter 1044, used mythical fruits and ancient weapons to challenge oppressors, sinking kingdoms that enslaved, just like the government does with Ohara in Chapter 395. This fear came from extreme actions. Imagine an ancestral D destroying a tyrannical nation with a solar punch that creates created tsunamis, just like Luffy against Kaido in Chapter 1049, causing mass destruction that the kingdom saw as demonic chaos. The ideological connection deepened the fear. The D now preached absolute freedom, inciting revolts against monarchies, just like Dragon in Chapter 432. In Chapter 1085, Emu calls the D enemies of God, suggesting that they defied the divinity of the celestial dragons with powers like Nika, who laughs at authority in Chapter 1045. Luffy, upon learning this, would say they were scared because the D wanted everyone to be equal. Then Emu is the coward. The fear was existential. The D not only destroyed, they inspired the masses, just like Luffy does with the Grand Fleet in Chapter 800. The connection of the D with the Great Kingdom is the Dark Core. They were its warriors or leaders, like Joy Boy, who used Nika in Chapter 1044 to fight for freedom. The Great Kingdom, described in Chapter 1115 as an advanced civilization destroyed by the 20 kingdoms, may have been founded by the D, a spiritual lineage that carried the initial as a code for Dawn or Deus, symbolizing Nika's son. They hid secrets like the One Piece, created to revive freedom, as Roger discovers in Chapter 968. In Chapter 967, Roger laughs at the legacy. The D may have hidden the Great Kingdom's truth to protect future heirs like Luffy, who awakens the drums of liberation in Chapter 1043. Luffy, upon deciphering this, would shout, "So my family built a free kingdom? Then let's rebuild it with a giant feast." The connection is that the D were the heart of the kingdom. Its defenders who challenged Emu and the kings with divine powers. And Luffy is the final flame of that fire. The D survived through secrecy and fate, like an ember that never goes out. After the defeat in Chapter 1115, they were hunted, but some escaped by blending in. Like the Nefertari, who refused to become celestial dragons in Chapter 1085, the initial D, appearing in scattered families like Luffy in Chapter 1 or Saul and Ohara in Chapter 392, suggests us a spiritual inheritance, not a bloodline, passed down by will, like the willpower hockey in Chapter 519. They hid their identities, living in secret like Garp in Chapter 432, who raised Luffy while serving in the Marines. Their survival is a miracle of resilience, with the D keeping their secret until the right moment, just like Roger when he surrendered in Chapter 0 to inspire a new era. Luffy, upon learning this, would laugh, "They fooled the whole world. Awesome! Let's do the same." His reaction would turn the obscure into hope, like in Chapter 1045, where he laughs at death as Nika. What we know is that the bond of the D with the Great Kingdom was profound. They were its guardians, like Joy Boy leading with Nika in Chapter 1044 to protect technologies that Vegapunk recreates in Chapter 1069, such as infinite solar energy. The D hid these secrets to protect future heirs, carving them into poneglyphs that only Robin can read in Chapter 398 so that the world wouldn't repeat its mistakes. How did they survive? Through secrecy and fate. After the defeat, the D scattered, changing names and living in the shadows, like the Nefertari, who refused to become celestial dragons in Chapter 1085, or Saul escaping from Ohara in Chapter 392. The initial D is a spiritual inheritance passed on by will, like hockey. In Chapter 519, surviving hunts like the one at Ohara in Chapter 395, because the D are like embers. They never fully die out, reborn in figures like Luffy in Chapter 1 or Dragon in Chapter 432. That was today's content. We hope you liked it and want to share your opinion on the subject. Don't forget to share the video, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and stay amazing.